our belief. So talking about a little bit about the Mashiach in this new book, Let's Get Ready. If you look for it in a Jewish bookstore, if you can call us or write to us at our name that's on the screen. But it's a good book. I think it's interesting for not only for children, as I say, because there's a lot of good ideas that even adults have questions on, and hopefully they did answer the many questions that you have, and you enjoyed learning about this concept. Thank you very much. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we have some stories. Everybody loves a good story, and they're children's stories, but stay tuned, of course, as we always say, because these stories are actually fitting for adults. I love reading them and understanding them and the good morals that they come through, and I'm sure people of all ages will have a good time listening to these wonderful stories of past history and, like I say, of good moral value. Now, this story is called The Horse and Its Rider. This story is being told about in Spain, and as we say that we had previous shows that about 500 years ago, that of course Columbus discovered America. That's probably pops into everybody's mind nowadays. But of course that it was the same exact year of the Spanish Inquisition. Now the Spanish Inquisition was that any person of that wasn't part of the faith in Spain was told to, you have number one, convert, or number two, die. Well, the Jewish people at that time took the third option. And the third option was that they were going to outwardly look like everybody else, but inwardly they were going to be faithful Jews. But that meant that they had to keep, for example, as we're going to be told about the story, Passover Seder, which is so very important. They're going to keep in the middle of the night in the basement where nobody knows about it, because they always knew that the hand of the Inquisition was near and had its spies. And if they would ever be caught, they knew that what would be happening. And usually what happened was torture and public burning at the stake, which was obviously not a lot of fun. So therefore, keeping a little bit of the historical perspective in mind, let's commence. It was springtime in Spain, and the year was 1490. The Inquisition, headed by the evil Torquemada, was in the process of mobilizing its full force against the Marranos. The Marranos were the secret Jews who had been forced to adopt the faith and customs of the Christian oppressors, but did so outwardly while secretly observing whatever mitzvahs that they could. Passover was approaching, and many secret Jews were planning to defy the dangers of the deadly Inquisition and its ever-watchful spies. The urge to celebrate the Passover Seder was so strong and meaningful to them that they felt that the risk was worth it. Torquemada summoned the spies months before Passover. Many converted Jews will be observing their spring festival, he declared. That's the time to catch them. Then he outlined some guidelines. You must all have jobs in Marrano households in any capacity, servants, domestics, gardeners, and go out of your way to win your employer's trust and confidence. Of course, the chief inquisitor continued, we despise these converts because they converted only to save their skins. We call them Marranos, pigs. But you must keep your personal feelings strictly to yourselves and must never let them suspect that you are spying on them. Keep your eyes and ears open and report to us any action or behavior that may mark them as secret Jews. We have drawn up a list of such actions that are to be reported to us, such as bitter herbs, eating bitter herbs at Passover, fasting on Yom Kippur, or wearing a clean shirt on their Sabbath, and so on. On the basis of your report, we can make an arrest. Once the accused is in our custody, we have the means to make him confess. We can also make the accuser reveal to us the names of fellow Jews who, like him, secretly practice acts of heresy. And the names of these Jews encourage them to remain loyal to their faith. Then we sentence them to be burnt publicly as heretics. Their wealth is seized for the king's treasury and the church. And this should be of special interest to you. The informers and agents who reported them to the Inquisition get a special generous bonus. After a period of questions and answers, Torquemada's agents were dismissed, all eager to do their very utmost to earn the generous reward he promised them in this world and in the hereafter. Meanwhile, true to Torquemada's expectations, many a Jewish home in Spain prepared for Passover in strictest secrecy. We have to be extremely careful this time of the year, Mayor remarked to his wife Hannah. Our enemies know that our beloved Jewish festival is coming, and they will be looking for victims to drag to the Inquisition on the slightest suspicion. A dark cloud covered Hannah's face as she heard her husband's words. Yes, and if this happens, God forbid, there is no escape from torture and execution. Hashem is testing us as to how strong we are in our loyalty to Him. If we pass this test, He will surely protect us, her husband reassured her. Then he added, we will discuss all details tonight, after the servants are gone for the night. Late that night, long after the servants had left, the family gathered for a special conference. In addition to the parents, there was Yaakov, who was 14, and old Avraham 12, and Dinah 6 years old. Father said, we all remember last Passover, when our very careful precautions, but above all, thanks to God, came off smoothly. We will follow the same way, hoping and praying with all our heart that Hashem will again be with us. During the day there will be nothing different in our home. At night, however, about 2 hours after our personal servants, Alfonso and his wife Maria, leave for the night, our special Passover preparations shall begin. Everything connected with Passover will be done in our secret cellar, where we shall have our Seder on the first 2 nights of Passover. As you know, we have a secret staircase leading from my study room to the cellar. Its entrance hidden by a cleverly built-in movable bookcase. Father went on to detail the precautions that had to be remembered, and the special duties that each of the children had to carry out. And so, my dear ones, with trust in Hashem, the guardian of the Jews, who neither sleeps nor slumbers, we shall celebrate the Seder in joy and peace. The family would have been more apprehensive had they known that their devoted servant Alfonso was one of Torquemada's secret agents, and how eager he was to betray them for the promised reward. Following the secret meeting with the chief inquisitor, Alfonso began to spy in earnest on his master and mistress and their children as to any sign of being secret Jews. But day after day passed without anything suspicious taking place in the daily routine of the family. Passover was now rapidly approaching, and Alfonso was beginning to doubt whether his master and his family were indeed Jews in secret. Then one morning he saw Maria coming out of the house on the way to the market with a long list of vegetables that her mistress had requested her to buy. Making sure that they were hidden from view, Alfonso looked over the list, and he could barely conceal his excitement. Among the items on the list were parsley, celery, and romaine lettuce, which he knew were used by Jews as bitter herbs at the Seder. Perhaps this is the break I've been waiting for, Alfonso thought. However, after discussing the shopping list with Maria, his excitement vanished when she told him that her mistress buys these foods all year. Nevertheless, his suspicion lingered on. Thinking the matter over and over again, Alfonso decided that this bitter herb suspicion by itself certainly was far from offering grounds for denouncing the family as heretics. It could become highly significant, however, together with a similar suspicious action. But if there is no further sign or indication of any suspicion, in that case Alfonso decided it would be necessary to take the bull by the horns. Finally, he thought of a plan. Alfonso's plan of action was bold and dangerous. On the night of the Seder, before leaving the house for the night, he would leave a kitchen window slightly open. In order to gain entry into the house, at midnight he would quietly enter the house and would tiptoe his way to the children's bedrooms. If the children would be asleep in their beds, there would be no need to investigate further. But if the children would not be in their rooms, it would be clear that they were with their parents in some secret place in the house, observing the Seder. He would then gallop on horseback to the Inquisition headquarters to report his discovery and return to the house at the head of a detail of armed soldiers, just in time to surprise the secret Jews in the middle of their Seder. Well, it was quiet in the house when Alfonso eased himself through the window into the kitchen. Familiar with the layout in the house, he could move about noiselessly without stumbling in the darkness. The light of a full moon shining through here and there made it even easier. His heart leaped for joy when he found the children's rooms empty. So that's it. Somewhere in the house the family was observing the Seder. Am I lucky, Alfonso thought gleefully, but now I mustn't waste a minute. With hard riding there and back we will make it well before they finish the Seder. Alfonso hurried to the stables and saddled the master's fastest steed. To make sure that the surprised horse would not express indignation at being disturbed in the middle of the night with a loud neigh, Alfonso stuffed a carrot in its mouth. Then he hastily mounted it, and off they went at full speed. In the meantime, blissfully unaware of the grave danger hanging over their heads, the family was celebrating the Seder in the hidden cellar. The Seder table was set beautifully with silverware, wine cups, Seder plates. Parents and children were seated around the table, and the Seder started with the traditional Kiddush over red wine, the first of the 4 cups. Soon the center of attention turned to the children, as each one of them in turn recited the 4 questions. The Haggadah was recited in a fairly relaxed mood, to the extent possible under the circumstances. When it was time for the festive meal, they eagerly ate the matzah, the bitter herbs, and the tasty dishes, with the afikomen as the last dessert. Finally, with the last 2 cups of wine, the third one after benching, the grace after meals, and the 4th after the conclusion of the Haggadah, the Seder came to a happy end. Quietly, the family went upstairs to their dimly lit bedrooms with deep gratitude in their hearts to Hashem for enabling them to observe the Seder safely. Little did they know the wonderful miracle that happened to them during that night. Before going to bed, Meir made a final checkup of the door and windows, as was his custom. He was terribly shocked when he noticed the kitchen window was partly open. Could it be the work of a burglar? But nothing valuable was missing and nothing was disturbed. Well, he'd have a stern talk with the servants for being so negligent. He closed the window and went to bed. Racing against time to Torquemado's headquarters, Alfonso kept whipping the horse furiously. Hurry, hurry, you lazy bones! He kept spurring the horse to maintain the furious pace. Well, his mind was filled with all sorts of fantastic thoughts of riches and glory for discovering and denouncing such a prominent and wealthy family of secret Jews. Certainly the head of the family, and possibly also his wife, would be condemned to burn alive at the auto de fe, the ceremonious public burning. Indeed, he, Alfonso, might even be called upon for the privilege of setting the pile of firewood on fire. Hurry, hurry, you vile beast! Alfonso spurred on the sweating horse. We are nearly... Alfonso did not finish the sentence, for at that moment the horse suddenly reared on its hind legs, throwing off his rider to the ground, and giving him a couple of kicks in the face with a vengeance. Thereupon it turned around and sauntered leisurely back home. Dawn began to break when the horse arrived at the familiar stable and announced his return with a loud and triumphant neighing. Meir woke up with a start, dressed quickly, and hurried outside to the stables. Some of the servants were there. Where is Alfonso? Fetch him! The master ordered while examining the bruises and whip marks on the horse's hide. No wonder the mistreated horse threw his rider, he said quietly. Meir knew that only Alfonso could have taken the horse out in the middle of the night, and obviously was in a great hurry to get somewhere. But where was he racing, and for what purpose? Suddenly, everything became clear to Meir, including the mystery of the unlocked kitchen window. Meir was not surprised when the servants returned, saying Alfonso was nowhere around. He called upon 2 stable attendants to ride out on 2 other horses in search of Alfonso. He may be hurt bad. How foolish of him to take on my favorite horse and race him wildly in the night, the master added sadly. Serves him right, some of the servants remarked unkindly. Apparently Alfonso was not popular with the other servants. Meir went back to the house to wait for the return of the search party. Oh, he let them find him dead, with his mouth shut forever and his evil designs dead with him. Meir shuddered to think what may happen if Alfonso was still alive when found and able to tell his rescuers what he was up to that night. It was several hours later when the searchers returned with the dead body of Alfonso. Yes, it was Alfonso's body, though his face was beyond recognition. Was he breathing? Was he able to say anything to you? Meir asked the two servants who brought the body. No, senor. He was dead as a doorknob. It was impossible to tell whether he died from the fall or the angry horse finished him off by trampling him. Meir was careful not to show how relieved he was to hear the wonderful news. The following night, as the family sat down at the beautifully laid table for the second Seder, everyone was naturally more relaxed than the night before, having shed the strain and anxiety that usually go with the first Seder. But Meir, understandably, was especially elated, though he had not as yet told his wife or his children how they were all miraculously saved from certain disaster the night before when celebrating the Seder. The appropriate moment for breaking the wonderful news came when they recited the passage in the Haggadah that reads, "In every generation our enemies rise up against us to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, delivers us from their hands." At this point, Meir began humming a melody and repeating the refrain from the Song of the Sea that Moshe and the children of Israel sang after the miraculous crossing of the Yam Suf. The horse and his rider he cast into the sea. Meir smiled as he saw the puzzled look on the faces of the family. He related the details of the events of the previous night and how they were saved from a terrible fate almost at the last moment. So you recall the refrain of the Song of the Sea? The horse and his rider he cast into the sea. You see, he explained, Pharaoh's whole cavalry, horses and chariots, were in hot pursuit after the fleeing Jewish refugees, whom Hashem freed a week earlier on the night of Passover. And just as they came almost within an arm's length to pounce upon their prey, Hashem caused a wall of water to collapse upon them and swept horse and rider to death. The miracle that saved us last night, Meir continued, was almost like the miracle at the Yam Suf, at the Red Sea. Then earnestly he continued, tonight we thank Hashem with all our heart, not only for the wonderful deliverance of our ancestors from their Egyptian oppressors, but also for our own personal deliverance from the Inquisition. Tonight we can truly feel the meanings of the words of the Haggadah, that on Passover night every Jew should consider himself as having been personally delivered from Egypt. Let us carry this sincere feeling of joy and gratitude to Hashem in our heart each and every day of the year until Hashem sends us to complete an everlasting deliverance to Mashiach Tzidkenu. Well, as he says in this book, many people ask about my stories. Are they true or not? I mean, did that really happen that way? And some of these stories that maybe that they have a little bit of a poetic license, it could have happened, and maybe something near to that happened, but who's to tell? As long as we get the good idea from it and we understand a little bit more of history. These stories that we're going to tell now are actually true stories and documented, but it's also just as marvelous. And it is called the Royal Banquet. Once upon a time, there lived a kindly and gracious king. The king's prime minister, however, was not a kindly man. He disliked some people, but most of all, he disliked the Jews. One day, the prime minister heard about a holy Jewish man, a tzaddik, who was said to be able to perform wonders. This man, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem, was his name, lived in a small log house near the edge of a thick forest, where he spent his days and nights in prayer and Torah study. From time to time, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem would wander off into the forest for many hours. On one of his secluded walks, he chanced upon a hidden cave. There he found an ancient book which must have been left by a tzaddik who frequented that cave. Rabbi Adam carefully brushed off the dust and opened it. At once he felt a great light shining forth from its pages. He sat down on a stump at the cave's entrance and began to study the handwritten text, which revealed many secrets of the Torah and the wisdom of great Jewish sages of bygone generations. From this holy book he learned how to heal sick people and do extraordinary things in time of need. Thus, on one occasion, he was able to cure a snake-bitten child from the deadly poison. On another occasion, he saved a peasant from the clutches of a ferocious bear chasing him, simply by standing in front of the bear and staring into his eyes, whereupon the huge beast turned around and lumbered off. Before long, people were telling wonderful things about this miracle man. And so he became known as Rabbi Adam Baal Shem, Master of God's Name, a title bestowed on a few outstanding tzaddikim, the most famous of whom was Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus. Now the king's prime minister believed none of this. He thought that this Jew Adam was a fraud and impostor pretending to be what he is not. The prime minister decided to put him to shame and prove to the king that all Jews are like him. With this in mind, the prime minister persuaded the king to invite Rabbi Adam Baal Shem to a royal banquet. When the messenger delivered the king's invitation, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem accepted it on condition that he would be allowed to bring his own food and wine. At the appointed time, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem arrived at the king's palace for the banquet. He delighted the king and all the royal guests with words of wisdom. And he also explained to the king why, being a Jew, he wasn't able to taste any of the delicious food and wine from the king's table. The prime minister was agreeing with Avi, seeing the honor the Jew received and how deeply impressed the king was with his Jewish guest. At the end of the banquet, when Rabbi Adam took leave of the king, the prime minister said to Rabbi Adam, "Would it not be right and proper to return in kind the king's invitation and be host to his majesty and his counselors at a royal banquet? Or is this perhaps too much to expect even of so famous a wonder worker as you are said to be?" The prime minister expected the Tzaddik to get red in the face and utter some words of apology. Instead, the Tzaddik turned pleasantly to the king and said confidently, "This is just what I was about to say. I would certainly be greatly honored to host a royal banquet for your majesty and your friends at any time the king will choose." The king set the date for 2 weeks later. At the time of the return banquet was approaching, the prime minister sent out scouts to report on the preparations that Tzaddik was making for the banquet. The scouts reported that the Jew was sitting in his hut poring over his books. There was no sign of any other activity. Day after day, the scouts went to the edge of the forest and returned with the same report. The prime minister was gleeful. He could not wait to see the Tzaddik's face when he sees the king and his royal company coming to the banquet. Some banquet! Finally came the day of the banquet. Earlier that morning, the king sent a messenger to Rabbi Adam to inform him that the royal party would be coming to the banquet later that afternoon. The messenger returned and told the king that he saw no sign of any preparation for this banquet, but that the host said he was grateful for the honor and that he hoped the king and his men would enjoy their visit. At the appointed time, the king and his men, including the prime minister, arrived at the spot where Rabbi Adam's hut was supposed to be. But they were astonished beyond words at what their eyes saw. Gone was the hut, and there stood before their eyes a most beautiful palace surrounded by lovely gardens, with flowing fountains, lush flowers and shrubs, and tree-lined walks. Servants in livery stood in readiness to serve the guests, bearing silver trays laden with delicious fruits and relishes. Others were carrying decanters and glasses filled with sparkling wines and liqueurs. Still others stood ready with trays of pastry and all kinds of delicacies. Descending wide marble stairs to greet the king was the host, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem, dressed in a black silk robe. He led the king and his men through beautifully decorated halls to the huge banquet hall, where a sumptuous banquet was ready to be served by smartly dressed waiters and butlers. The king and his men thoroughly enjoyed the most delicious food and drinks they had ever tasted. One man, however, felt miserable. He was the prime minister, whose heart was filled with frustration and jealousy. At the conclusion of the banquet, the king toasted the host, praised him, and thanked him for the most wonderful banquet. Then he rose to leave, and all the guests rose to follow the king. One man, however, sitting next to the king, remained seated, his face crimson with embarrassment. He strained to get up, but could not rise, as if he were glued to his seat. "What is the matter with you?" the king said, looking angrily at his prime minister. "Have you stuffed yourself and guzzled so much that you cannot get up?" The poor prime minister mumbled apologetically that it was not his fault. The Jew must have bewitched him. "How dare you insult my host and friend?" the king thundered. At this point, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem remarked, "Your Majesty, the honorable prime minister probably could not resist the temptation to take a souvenir from the table. If he will put it back, he will have no trouble getting up." The prime minister's face turned deathly pale, and he sheepishly brought out from his pocket a golden salt shaker, richly decorated and inlaid with precious gems. With a trembling hand he put it back on the table and got up. The king threw a piercing look of disgust at his prime minister, and accompanied by his host, made his way to his royal carriage, thanking his host again for a most wonderful time, which he would long remember. Well, it's interesting to note we had two stories here. One that may have been a little bit on the fiction side, but like we say, it's probably for the most part certain things did happen that way, and like we say, truth is stranger, and who knows what really happened. And the second story, which we just read, was a little bit on stranger, if you must say, but on the other hand, that they do have documented that there are miracles in the world, and there are certain wonder workers of these famous rabbis who did have that power to do certain miracles, and that they did, for the most part, do their miracles and perform their wonders on behalf of people who needed their help. But if at times of trouble, in this case the time of emergency, they had to come up with some other wonders, who's to say maybe it really did happen also, that these are the wonders of the world, that really as people we don't know certain things that happen. Who's to say? I think if everybody would look at for themselves and look at the circumstances that they're in, if you look through back in your life, miracles do happen your way also, and certain wondrous things, and let's not call them accidents, let's not call them circumstances, let's call them maybe divine providence, that certain miracles may happen to people. But we have these few stories to say maybe a little bit extreme, and one story on the major part of extreme. But listen, everybody has things that happens to them, and maybe not as wondrous, I'm not going to say, but certain things that do happen to them, and miracles do happen, and special things happen to people, and it's a good thing that we read about them, so we should have a little bit more of an idea that when things happen to us, we should recognize that certain special things have been directed to us, and also in the future, that when we see that certain things, nothing's going to happen and it's not good enough, well, maybe certain things, beautiful things will happen, and who knows, things will turn out for the best. So I hope you enjoyed the stories, children and adults alike, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.